At 16, my dad dumped me miles from home and made me walk back in the freezing dark for talking back. My grandpa found me and rushed me to the ER, where CPS got involved. Police arrested my dad, and the perfect family they pretended to be finally collapsed. Hey, Reddit! My family always treated me like the built-in scapegoat while my sister got crowned royalty. I tried moving on with my life, but things didn't end there. Before I explain what they pulled, here's where it all started. My name is Mateo. I'm 23 now, but this happened when I was 16. Back then, I didn't have a car, a job, or any real way to protect myself. I lived in a house where my dad, Timothy, controlled the narrative. My mom, Abigail, backed him no matter what. And my younger sister, Anya, learned early that joining in meant she'd never be the target. I wasn't the wild kid people imagine when they hear problem child. I didn't skip school. I didn't sneak out. I didn't fight. But I asked questions. I noticed things. I didn't accept being lied about. That alone made me the designated issue. Timothy gave me the label difficult before I was even in high school. Once he decided that, nothing I did could erase it. If I talked, I was arguing. If I stayed quiet, I was pouting. If I disagreed, I was disrespectful. It was a role he needed me in. Abigail made sure the story stuck. She'd twist things so Timothy was always reasonable. If he yelled, she'd say, "You know how your father gets." If he insulted me, she'd say, "He's trying to make you stronger." If I pushed back, she said I was making drama. Anya watched all that and adapted. She figured out there were two types of people in our house, those Timothy approved of and those he steamrolled. She knew which side she wanted to be on. A smirk, an eye roll, a dig here and there. That was her contribution. The only place that ever felt remotely neutral was my Grandpa Patrick's house. He's my mom's dad. Not loud, not emotional, just steady. And the rest of the family, uncles, aunts, cousins, mostly kept to themselves when it came to conflict. They never stepped in, but they didn't add fuel either. That night, everyone was there for a family dinner. Uncle Ray and Aunt Lena, their kids, Aunt Nora and Uncle Paul, a handful of cousins ranging from 10 to 20. It should have felt crowded in a good way. It didn't. We got there late, which Timothy blamed on me before we even reached the porch. If someone didn't take forever to get ready, we'd be on time, he muttered. I was ready before everyone, I said quietly. Anya said, "Sure you were," like it was a running joke. Timothy snapped, "Don't start." Patrick opened the door, nodding us in. The house smelled like roast beef and potatoes. Everyone was already seated or getting settled. The noise of conversations dipped slightly when we walked in, which wasn't new. Aunt Nora waved. "Hey, Mateo." Aunt Lena gave me a small smile. "School treating you okay?" Before I could answer, Timothy cut in. "He'd be doing better if he put in actual effort." Uncle Ray raised an eyebrow, but didn't comment. My cousins exchanged glances. This wasn't new for them either. We took our seats. I sat near the end, closer to the younger kids. Timothy and Abigail sat near Patrick, like they always did, and Anya sat with the older cousins, where she could pretend she was above everything. For a few minutes, we ate quietly. Then Timothy started. "So, Matt," he said loudly enough for half the table to hear, "still having trouble at school?" I looked at him. "I'm not having trouble." Aunt Nora asked, "What kind of trouble?" Timothy answered before I could. "Oh, you know, teachers calling home about his attitude. Same old story." "That didn't happen," I said. Abigail sighed dramatically. "Mateo, don't get defensive." Uncle Paul glanced over at me. "Teachers actually called?" "No," I said again. Timothy scoffed. "Here we go." Anya laughed under her breath. "He does this every time." Timothy kept going, listing fake issues like he was reading from a file. He said I was lazy. He said I didn't help around the house. He said I had no direction, no goals, no respect. Some cousins looked uncomfortable. Others looked anywhere but at me. Then Timothy dropped the lie that pushed everything too far. He said, "Patrick, you'll get a kick out of this. Mateo got suspended last month for mouthing off." I froze. So did a few cousins. I said, "I never got suspended." Conversation around the table died instantly. Uncle Ray looked up. "You didn't?" "No," I said. "Not once." Timothy stared at me like he couldn't believe I'd spoken. "So you're calling me a liar in front of everyone?" "I'm saying it didn't happen." Aunt Lena set down her glass. The tension was obvious even to the younger kids. Abigail said, "Mateo, you know what your father means." "No," I said again. "I don't." Timothy slammed his hand down. A couple cousins jumped. "You don't correct me in my father-in-law's house." Patrick spoke without raising his voice. "Timothy, enough." But Timothy wasn't listening. He pushed his chair back so hard it bumped the wall. "We're leaving." Abigail immediately stood, gathering her purse. "Let's go." Anya smirked at me. Nice job, Matt. The aunts and uncles looked stunned, whispering to each other, but none of them said anything to stop Timothy. Patrick watched all of us with a look I'll never forget. He wasn't shocked. He was worried. We walked out to the car in silence. The cold air hit hard. Timothy didn't say a word as we buckled in. He just started the engine and pulled away fast. I stared out the window. I knew the pattern. I knew his mood. I knew how tightly he gripped the wheel when he was planning something. I didn't know what he was about to do, but I knew it wasn't going to be just yelling this time. The car ride home started in complete silence. Not the quiet kind that happens when people are tired. The heavy kind that feels like something is building underneath it. Timothy's jaw was tight, and he kept gripping and re-gripping the steering wheel like he was trying to keep himself from exploding again. The headlights from passing cars flashed across his face, making every muscle in his jaw stand out. I sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead. Nobody said anything for the first few minutes. Then Abigail finally spoke. Tim, you can't let him talk to you like that in front of the whole family. It was humiliating. Timothy didn't look at her. He thinks he's grown. That's the problem. He made you look like you don't know what's going on, she added. In front of your in-laws, too. Anya leaned forward from the back seat. He always does this. He can't just take responsibility like a normal person. I didn't say anything. Anything I said would just get twisted. Timothy finally spoke. He wants to act like a man? Okay, we'll see. Abigail nodded like she agreed completely. He needs a reality check, Anya snorted. Like, a big one. Timothy took a deep breath, the kind he only took when he was getting ready to lecture. You don't get it, Matteo. Respect isn't optional. You don't get to correct me. Not at my father-in-law's table. Not in front of your aunts and uncles. You embarrassed this family tonight. I looked at the window instead of at him. Look at me, he said sharply. I turned my head slightly. That's your problem. You always think you're right. You think you don't have to listen. You live under my roof. You eat my food. The least you can do is show some gratitude, Abigail added, and not make things uncomfortable for everyone. There were children at that table. Anya said, honestly, you should have just kept your mouth shut. Timothy kept driving, and something in the route felt wrong. We passed the turn that would have taken us back home. I assumed he'd loop around or take a different street, but then he passed another familiar turn, and another. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was late, around 10. The winter sky outside was pitch black. Where are we going? I asked quietly. Timothy didn't answer. Anya laughed. Oh my God, he's scared. Abigail said, Matteo, just don't start. We're not going home yet, Timothy said finally. You need to learn something first. I didn't ask what. I already had a sinking feeling. He kept driving until the streetlights became less frequent and the houses thinned out. The familiar neighborhoods turned into long stretches of empty road. There were no sidewalks, no stores, no people, just open fields and a few trees. Timothy finally pulled the car over on a narrow shoulder. The only light came from the car's headlights, shining onto gravel and dead grass. Get out, he said. I thought I heard him wrong. What? He turned toward me, his face hard. Get out. Abigail didn't look at me. She stared straight ahead like she didn't want to be part of the moment, even though she absolutely was. Dad, I said quietly, it's cold. You should have thought about that before you opened your mouth at dinner, he snapped. You want to act like an adult? Adults walk. Adults take responsibility for what they do. Anya let out a short laugh. This is so dramatic. Just get out. Timothy pointed at the door. Out. Now. I opened the door slowly. The cold hit me immediately, sharper than I expected. My breath showed in the air. Timothy leaned toward me. You're going to walk home. Maybe it'll give you time to think about the disrespect you showed tonight. Abigail still didn't turn around. She didn't say a single word like, stop, or, Timothy, this is too far, or even wait. Nothing. She just sat there, hands in her lap. I stepped out onto the gravel. And Matteo, Timothy said, don't bother coming back through that door tonight acting like a victim. You brought this on yourself. Anya shook her head. Unbelievable. I shut the door slowly, not slamming it, not resisting. The cold was biting, and I already felt it through my clothes. Timothy stared at me through the window for one long second. Then he drove off. No hesitation, no slowing down. The car pulled back onto the road and disappeared into the darkness, the red taillights shrinking until they vanished completely. The sound of the engine faded. The silence that replaced it was immediate, and I was alone in the dark, 16 years old, on an empty road in winter, with no jacket, no plan, and a very long walk ahead. The moment Timothy's car vanished, the cold rushed in hard. It wasn't the soft kind of cold you feel walking to school in the morning. It was the kind that bites instantly. My hoodie did nothing. The wind pushed straight through it. I stood there for a second, staring down the empty road, trying to understand how he had actually left me in the middle of nowhere. This stretch of road wasn't a normal route home. Timothy had taken a back road that cut through farmland and industrial space. Nobody walked there. Nobody drove there unless they were using it as a shortcut or hauling equipment. After dark, the road was basically abandoned. If a car came by at all, it would be once every 20 or 30 minutes, usually a semi heading toward the highway entrance farther down. Not the kind of driver who stops for a teenager in the cold. And police didn't patrol rural routes unless they had a reason. They stayed closer to the neighborhoods, traffic lights, and places where things actually happened. Out here, there were no stores, no parking lots, no businesses still open, nothing for a patrol car to check on. I started walking because standing still made the cold worse. My shoes hit the gravel loudly, but the sound felt swallowed by the wind. I shoved my hands into my pockets, but the fabric didn't hold any warmth. My fingers were already stiff. After a few minutes, the cold slid deeper. My fingertips stung, then numbed. My toes felt like they were wrapped in ice. I tried flexing them, but I couldn't tell if they were actually moving. I forced myself to breathe through my nose, but each inhale felt razor sharp. The air burned on the way in. I tried to stay focused on the direction of home. Timothy hadn't driven in circles or anything. He'd gone south, then east. Once I hit the start of the long stretch near the industrial park, I knew I just had to keep heading toward town. It would take close to an hour on foot, maybe more in the cold. Every once in a while I glanced behind me, hoping for headlights. Any headlights. But the road stayed empty. No cars, no trucks, no one coming home late from work, just blackness and wind. I reached for my phone without thinking, the one comfort I had. When I pressed the button, nothing happened. The screen stayed black. I tried again, but the battery was dead. It must have drained during dinner when I wasn't paying attention. My stomach sank a little. No flashlight, no map, no call for help. People always ask, why didn't you just go straight to the police? Why not knock on the nearest door? But out here, there were no houses, no buildings, nothing. And calling the cops wasn't an instinct that existed in Timothy's house. I'd been raised to believe Timothy would always win if it came to explanations. If I told officers he dumped me on a dark road, he'd say I ran away. If I said he locked me out, he'd say I was unstable. Abigail would nod along. Anya would back whatever made me look dramatic. So even if my phone had worked, I wouldn't have felt safe calling anyone in uniform. Calling the police from the side of a dark road would have been me versus my parents. And I'd been trained my whole life to lose that fight. But in the ER, with Patrick there, and nurses watching my hands turn back to color, it stopped being a family issue Timothy could spin. It became a record. I shoved the phone back in my pocket and kept walking. My fingers hurt again, like the feeling was trying to come back, but couldn't make it all the way. My toes were worse. My legs felt heavy. My throat burned each time I breathed. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other. Fear sat low in my stomach, not loud or panicked, just steady. I kept glancing down the road, hoping for a car. Even one, but nothing came, not a single set of headlights. It made the walk feel endless. Eventually, streetlights appeared in the distance, faint little dots that barely cut through the darkness. My neighborhood wasn't close, but at least I'd made it to the edge of town. There were a few scattered houses out here, but their lights were all off. No movement, no cars on the road. As I crossed into the first residential block, the cold got worse in a different way. It wasn't the wind now. It was the way my clothes felt wet from sweat that had chilled against my skin. My arms shook. My teeth wouldn't stop clicking. I rubbed my hands together, but I still couldn't feel my fingertips. The closer I got to my street, the more the fear shifted into something else. Not relief, just dread. I knew what the house would feel like when I walked up. Timothy wouldn't be suddenly sorry. Abigail wouldn't apologize. Anya wouldn't pretend she cared. I turned onto my block. A couple porch lights were on at my neighbors' houses. Cars sat in driveways, windows dark. Everything looked still and normal. By the time I reached the walkway leading up to my house, the cold had settled into my bones. The first thing I noticed was the porch light. It was off. Timothy never turned it off when anyone in the family was out late. Even when he was angry, even when he was making a point, he left that light on. Seeing it dark made something in my stomach twist. I went up the steps quickly, trying to force warmth back into my legs. My fingers struggled to grip the doorknob, but I finally managed to twist it. Locked. I tried again. Still locked. I knocked. Just once at first. Nothing. I knocked louder. Mom, it's me. Still nothing. I pounded on the door with the side of my fist, because my knuckles hurt too much to use directly. Mom, open the door! For a second, the house stayed silent. Then I heard something. Laughing. Not loud, but clear enough to know exactly who it belonged to. Anya. Her laugh had a specific tone whenever she felt she'd won something. The sound cut straight through the cold. I stepped back from the door and went to the nearest window, cupping my hands around my face to block the glare from the streetlight. Inside, the hallway light was on, but nothing else. I moved to the second window, the one next to the living room. Our living room window faced the staircase straight on, so you could see up the steps from the glass if the hallway light was on. The curtains were partly open. I leaned in closer and scanned the room. No one. Then I looked up the stairs. The hallway light spilled into one of the rooms, the room at the top of the stairs. My room. And in the doorway, sitting comfortably on my bed, was Anya. She had her headphones in, her feet crossed, and she was scrolling on my old laptop like she owned the place. My posters were gone. My shelves were empty. Clothes that weren't mine were piled on the dresser. My bedspread was replaced with one of hers. Bright colors, glittery pillows, the works. That realization hit me harder than the cold had. They hadn't done this in the last hour. They'd planned it before we even went to dinner. I knocked on the window. Anya! She looked up, saw me, and grinned. Then she turned slightly and shouted something toward the hallway. I couldn't hear the words, but I recognized the tone. Taunting. Then she laughed again. I slammed my hand against the window. Open the door! No reaction. She just went right back to whatever she was doing, perfectly comfortable in the warmth while I stood outside freezing. I moved back to the front door and pounded harder. Mom! Dad! I'm freezing out here! A moment later, I saw movement through the frosted glass of the door. Abigail. She stepped into view for 1 second. Her hand was on the lock. For a moment I hoped, she was going to open it. But instead she looked directly at me through the glass. Her face didn't look surprised. It didn't look confused. It didn't look worried. She looked annoyed, like I'd interrupted something. Then she shook her head, turned away, and walked back toward the living room. My chest tightened. I hit the door again. Mom, seriously. I walked home. I'm freezing. I heard Timothy's voice from inside. His tone carried through even with the door muffling it. Let him learn. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, final, pure dismissal. Then another laugh from upstairs. I stared at the door, unable to fully process what was happening. They weren't just ignoring me, they were leaving me outside on purpose. They had replaced me in my own room before I even got home. They weren't waiting to see if I came back. They had already decided what my new place was. The cold was becoming unbearable. My fingers barely moved. My toes felt like blocks inside my shoes. My breath came fast and shallow. Standing there any longer would have been stupid. Still, I tried one more time. Please, just open the door for a minute. I'm freezing. Nothing. Not a footstep. Not a reply. Not a single sign that anyone in that house cared. I was standing outside in the middle of winter, shaking and numb. I stepped back from the door slowly. My mind wasn't racing. It was too cold for that. Everything felt mechanical, like my body was making choices without waiting for my thoughts to catch up. If I didn't get inside somewhere soon, my body would start shutting down. That was the only thing I knew for sure. The house next door belonged to Mrs. Hawthorne, a widow in her early 60s who baked too much and gave away half of everything she made. She was the only adult on the street who ever bothered talking to me without a judgmental tone. I didn't know if she was awake. I didn't know if she would answer, but it was my only option. She didn't look like the type to care about tech, but after someone tried her back door a while ago, her son insisted on putting in a doorbell camera. She hated the idea at first, then loved knowing who was outside without opening the door. I turned away from my own front door and forced my legs to move down the steps. Each step felt heavier than the one before. The cold made everything stiff, uncooperative. I crossed the lawn, went up her walkway, and lifted my hand to knock. My fingers barely obeyed. It took 2 tries to make a sound loud enough to be heard. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I knew I couldn't stay outside any longer. I knocked again, harder this time, and waited, shivering, hoping someone, anyone, would open the door. The door opened and Mrs. Hawthorne stood there in her robe, hair tied back, face confused for half a second, then immediately concerned. Her eyes went straight to my hands, which were red and stiff, then to my face. Mateo? What on earth? Come inside. Now. I didn't have the strength to argue or explain on the porch. I stepped in, and the warmth hit me so hard it almost made me dizzy. She shut the door quickly behind me. Oh, my lord, she said. guiding me toward the living room. Your hands are like ice. She sat me on the couch, grabbed a knitted throw blanket from the armrest, and wrapped it around my shoulders without waiting for permission. Then she hurried off toward the kitchen. A moment later, she came back with a mug of warm water. Not hot, warm. Hold this, she said. Don't touch anything too hot. You'll hurt your skin. I tried wrapping my fingers around the mug, but they barely moved. She gently lifted my hands and placed them around it herself, making sure they were close enough to feel the heat without burning. What happened? She asked quietly. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out at first. My jaw shook too much. She sat on the coffee table in front of me, leaning in slightly but not pushing. Mateo, she said, steady and calm, you need to tell me what happened. I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself. My dad, my throat tightened. The words wouldn't line up right. She waited, patient, not reacting too fast, not jumping to conclusions. He dropped me off, I said finally. On a road, far from home. Her eyes focused sharply. Why would he do that? Because I talked back at dinner, I said. He said I embarrassed him. She didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at me, really looked, like she was taking in the shaking hands, the uneven breathing, the way my face looked blotchy from cold. And they wouldn't let you in? She asked. I looked down at the mug. They pretended they didn't hear me. Mrs. Hawthorne's voice lowered. Who locked the door? My mom, I said. She looked right at me, then walked away. Mrs. Hawthorne pressed her lips together. She didn't look surprised. She looked angry in a quiet, controlled way. She stood up. You're calling someone, she said. Not the police, not yet. Someone safe. I didn't answer. She pointed gently toward the phone sitting on the end table. Take it. Call whoever will actually come for you. There was only one person. My hands were barely working, but I managed to pick up the phone and dial Patrick's number from memory. It rang twice. Then his voice came on. Hello? I tried speaking, but my voice cracked halfway out. Grandpa, it's me, Mateo. His tone sharpened instantly. What's going on? Dad, I swallowed. He dropped me off, far from home, told me to walk. There was a pause. Not the confused kind, the calculating kind. Where are you now? He asked. At the neighbor's, I said. I walked home and they locked the door. They didn't let me in. Are you hurt? I'm cold, I said. Really cold. And your parents know you're outside? Yes. Another pause. Short. Heavy. I'm coming now, he said. Stay put. Don't go back over there. My breath hitched a little. Okay. He didn't hang up right away. Listen to me, Mateo. You did nothing wrong tonight. Do you understand? I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Okay. I'll be there soon. When the call ended, I handed the phone back to Mrs. Hawthorne with stiff fingers. She set it aside gently. He's coming? She asked. Yeah, she nodded. Good. Patrick's a solid man. She sat down in the armchair near me, not hovering, just staying close enough so I didn't feel alone. She didn't ask more questions. She didn't try to make things lighter. She didn't lecture me about how parents get stressed. She just stayed present, checking every few minutes to make sure I wasn't getting worse. A few minutes later, she got up again, grabbed a pair of thick socks from a basket near the stairs, and placed them next to me. When your feet warm up a little, put these on. Slowly. Don't rush. I nodded. My teeth were still chattering, but less violently now. The minutes stretched, but not in a painful way. Just quiet, steady waiting. The warmth in the room slowly settled over me. I still couldn't feel my toes, but the sting in my fingers was fading. Then headlights flashed across the front window. Mrs. Hawthorne stood, walked to the door, and opened it before Patrick even had a chance to knock. He stepped inside quickly, still wearing his coat, eyes scanning me immediately. What did he do to you? He asked, voice low. I didn't get a chance to answer. My body sagged forward, not collapsing, just releasing something heavy I'd been holding inside. Patrick stepped closer and put a steady hand on my shoulder. All right, he said. I've got you. We're going. Thank you, Mrs. Hawthorne, for taking him in. She nodded as we left. Patrick didn't waste a second once I was in his truck. He didn't ask for the full story right away. He didn't yell. He didn't say anything except, seatbelt, before pulling out of the neighbor's driveway. But his grip on the wheel told the whole story. His knuckles were white, tight enough that the skin around them looked stretched. I kept rubbing my hands together because they felt stiff and rubbery, but the heater blasting in the truck wasn't fixing it fast enough. Patrick glanced at me a few times. How long were you out there? Long enough, I said quietly. He dropped me off on that farm road. Patrick's jaw flexed. We'll talk after you're checked. He went straight to the ER without hesitation. The hospital entrance lights felt blinding after the dark roads. Patrick walked in fast, holding my arm steady when I stumbled. The triage nurse saw my hands and face and didn't ask for small talk. She called someone over immediately. "This kid needs a warm room," she said. "Possible frostbite on fingers and toes, hypothermia risk." They moved me into a room with heated blankets and a monitor. A nurse started assessing my hands, gently pressing different parts. "Can you feel this?" "Sort of," I said. "That's not the answer we want," she muttered and wrote something down. Another nurse checked my temperature. "He's cold. Like, dangerously cold." Patrick stood in the corner, arms crossed, watching everything with this controlled anger I'd never seen from him. A doctor came in, looked over the notes, then at me. "What happened? You get stranded somewhere," Patrick answered before I could. "His father dumped him on a road outside town." The doctor's eyebrows went up. "Intentionally?" "Yes," Patrick said. The doctor looked at me. "Is that true?" I nodded. "He told me to get out, said to walk home." While the staff took more notes, warmed my hands gradually, and checked circulation in my toes, another person walked in, a woman with a badge clipped to her shirt. She introduced herself. "I'm the ER social worker. I need to ask you some questions." Patrick stepped closer. "I'm staying." "That's fine," she said. Then she turned to me. "Mateo, can you walk me through everything that happened tonight? Start to finish?" I told her. I didn't embellish. I didn't dramatize. I just told her. The dinner, the drive, being dropped off, the walk, the front door being locked, the laughter, seeing Anya in my room, Abigail ignoring me, Timothy shouting from inside. The social worker kept a straight face, but her pen moved fast. "Did they know you were outside in the cold?" she asked. "Yes," I said. My mom looked right at me. My sister saw me and smirked. "And they didn't let you in?" "No." She nodded once and wrote a longer note. That detail changed something in her demeanor. It wasn't just neglect anymore. It was active, intentional harm. A nurse came back in. "Documentation is complete. Photos of hands and face uploaded. Circulation improving, but still concerning." The social worker turned to Patrick. "We're mandated reporters. I need you to understand this is no longer optional. We're notifying CPS and the police right now." Patrick nodded. "Good." I felt something inside me tense. Not fear exactly, but the realization that this was officially bigger than our household. Within 15 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. They spoke quietly with the social worker first, then approached my bed. One of them asked, "Mateo, your grandfather says your father left you on County Road 7. That correct?" "Yes." "And your mother and sister locked you out when you walked home?" "Yes." The officer looked at the social worker, who handed him printed documentation, photos, temperature readings, notes about numb fingers, and the statement about seeing my room replaced. "The locked out detail is significant," she said. "It suggests this was intentional." The officer nodded. "We'll need statements from everyone involved, but this is enough to initiate the process." The other officer pulled Patrick aside. "We'll be going to their house tonight." Patrick's voice was low. "Good. They shouldn't have a chance to twist anything." The officers left. The social worker stayed. "Mateo," she said, "given what we've documented, you're not going home with them tonight. We're arranging emergency kinship placement with your grandfather, and CPS will follow up." I nodded slowly. "Okay." Patrick put a hand on my shoulder. "You're coming with me. You're not stepping foot in that house again." Before she left, the social worker added one more thing. "We're requesting an emergency no-contact order tonight," she said. "A judge will have to sign it, but you're not going back with them." A nurse returned to check my hands again. Feeling had partially returned. Just as they finished wrapping my feet, the officer came back inside. "Your father is in custody," he said. "Based on what we have so far, we arrested him tonight." He hesitated, then added, "Your mother is being investigated too. What she did or didn't do matters here, and we'll document your sister's involvement as part of the case." The room stayed quiet after that. Not tense, just heavy with everything finally catching up. Patrick let out a long breath. "You're safe now," he said. For the first time all night, I believed him. Timothy didn't come home the night he was arrested, or the next day, or the next week. For the first time in my life, the story wasn't his to control. He couldn't corner anyone in a kitchen, couldn't raise his voice over mine, couldn't twist events into something that made him look strong and made me look ungrateful. People with badges and clipboards were writing the story now, not him. He spent the next few nights in county jail while everything was processed. Police booked him on suspicion of child abandonment and endangerment, words I'd never heard attached to him before. Over the next couple days, the prosecutor reviewed the reports. The ER notes, the photos, the statements. That's when it became real on paper. not just in my head. Two words that had never been used about him before: felony and father. At the arraignment, his lawyer tried to frame it as a misunderstanding in a stressful household. But the ER documentation, my temperature, the circulation loss, the photos of my hands, destroyed that angle immediately. The judge denied him release. Actions demonstrating disregard for a minor's safety, the judge said. Clear risk of repeated harm. Timothy didn't look at anyone when those words were spoken. He stared ahead like he couldn't believe the system wasn't bending for him. His job found out quickly. Small town, loud news. Within days, he was placed on leave while HR reviewed the situation. It wasn't a conviction, but it was enough for people to stop looking at him the same way. That meant everyone in his department knew. News spread quickly. Neighbors, co-workers, extended family. People who once treated him with automatic respect avoided talking about him. He lost the image he'd built for decades. Abigail wasn't spared either. CPS opened a full case on her for failure to protect. They had the doorbell camera footage from Mrs. Hawthorne showing me shivering on the porch, calling for help. They had the ER notes stating she saw me through the window and walked away. They had my statement and Patrick's. They had everything. Anya had to undergo psychological evaluation since she participated in the behavior. CPS documented her laughing, her taking my room, her treating the whole night like entertainment. They wrote it up as learned hostility reinforced by household dynamics. Extended family started taking sides. Some aunts and uncles called Patrick privately and said they were horrified. Some cousins messaged me saying they always knew something was wrong. Others insisted Timothy would never really do something like that I must have misinterpreted things, or that I was letting outsiders punish the family. Patrick shut down anyone who tried shifting blame my way. About a week after Timothy's arrest, the confrontation with Abigail happened. Patrick and I were in the living room when someone knocked. Soft, uneven, almost apologetic. Patrick paused halfway to the door, bracing himself. He already knew who it was. He opened the door only a crack. Abigail stood there, bundled in a coat. She looked exhausted, but not from crying, more like someone who hadn't slept since the arrest. "Dad," she whispered, "please, I need to talk to him." "You're not supposed to be here," Patrick said. "There's a no-contact order." "I'm his mother," her voice cracked. "I have every right." "You lost that right," Patrick said, "when you left my grandson in the freezing cold." She flinched as if he'd hit her. "Dad, it wasn't like that." "Then explain it," Patrick said. "He was angry," she said quickly. "Timothy was out of line, but you know how he gets." Things escalated. Patrick did not look away. "You looked at Mateo through the window and walked away." Her breath hitched. "I didn't know how cold he was." I stepped forward from behind Patrick. "You saw me shaken. You heard me knocking." She turned toward me, eyes watery. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You didn't care if you did," I said. Abigail shook her head. "That's not fair." Patrick's voice sharpened. "He could have died, Abigail." She looked between us, lost. "Dad, don't say it like I'm some monster." "You acted like one," Patrick said quietly. "Not because of who you are, because of who you let him turn you into." Abigail's composure cracked completely. "I just want my family back." Patrick answered before I could. "You want the illusion back. It's gone." She wiped her eyes. "I don't know how to fix this." "You start," Patrick said, "by accepting that Mateo isn't the one who broke anything." She exhaled shakily and stepped backward. "I hope someday you understand why I couldn't stand up to him." Patrick's voice was steady but cold. "And I hope someday you understand why you should have." She left without another word. The soft thud of the closing door sounded heavier than any slam. Patrick stood still for a moment, breathing slowly. Not angry, hurt. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though the weight in my chest didn't fully lift. "You didn't cause this," he said. They did. After that day, things settled into a strange but peaceful routine. CPS finalized my emergency kinship placement with Patrick. I had a room that stayed mine, a bed, a door that locked from the inside. No shouting, no accusations, no waiting for the next explosion. Timothy stayed in jail awaiting trial. Abigail kept undergoing CPS reviews and supervised interviews. Anya lived with a relative under oversight. The house I had grown up in didn't just shrink, it disappeared. One night, sitting on the edge of my new bed, I realized something I had never allowed myself to consider. I had been the mirror they didn't want to look into. The night I finally challenged a lie didn't destroy the family. It exposed the truth about the family. And for the first time, the consequences weren't falling on me. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and help us bring you more and better stories. Thanks.